Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At issue tonight, roads and bridges. The Mississippi House voted this week overwhelmingly in favor of devoting more money to fix state infrastructure. The plan was an add-on to a local tax bill, Senate Bill 2939. It calls for $50 million in bonds for bridge repairs. It also calls for millions of dollars to support roads and bridges from companies collecting taxes through internet sales if federal laws prohibiting internet taxes change. And it would set aside more state tax money when there's more than 2% growth. Altogether, these measures could generate up to $175 million for infrastructure by this summer. Here's House Speaker Philip Gunn.
We have consistently stated throughout this session that we understand the need. And we have taken more than one step toward trying to meet that need. This is another in a long series of efforts that we have made to try to address the need for roads and bridges. And I am proud today that our House of Representatives stood up, voted 109 to 7, I think, to support this plan. 4 aspects of it, basically to divert monies that either already exist or revenues that will come in toward fixing the roads and bridges. And I am proud of the leadership that brought this forward. Trey Lamar, Jason White, Charles Busby have kind of been the 3 guys that have led on this issue. They're the ones who've been out front all semester long, searching for solutions, coming up with ideas, trying to find ways that we can get money to fix our roads and bridges. As I said the last time I stood before you, roads and bridges affect everybody in this state. And we last time, of course, had an enormous number of people behind us, everybody from lawyers to accountants to business leaders, not just those who build the roads. Everybody is affected by our roads and bridges. This is an issue that affects all Mississippians, and we're trying to come forward with some solutions that will meet that need.
The Mississippi Economic Council announced its support for the plan at a press conference on Thursday afternoon. But seconds after that was over, Democratic Senator Hob Bryan of Amory took the podium to voice his difference of opinion. He says Republican-designed tax breaks for big businesses have made it difficult to find money for state infrastructure.
Over the past few years, this legislature has cut billions and billions and billions of dollars out of our general fund. Just last session, the legislature voted to reduce the general fund by 10% a year, with a tax cut that was geared primarily to out-of-state corporations who are not necessarily paying their fair share of their Mississippi taxes, and just as a lagniappe, threw in a state income tax cut, which I don't know anyone seeking. Meanwhile, as I'm sure you're aware, the state has taken hundreds of millions of dollars to give people incentives to build shopping centers in South Madison County, to give people incentives to build shopping centers on the Gulf Coast and in DeSoto County. You couldn't keep people from building those shopping centers if you called out the National Guard with bayonets fixed. The legislature is losing, according to the State Tax Commission, more than $100 million a year through a poorly designed scheme to reimburse people for their income, for their inventory taxes. In other words, the legislature voted to take your tax dollars out of the general fund and use them to reimburse Walmart for their property taxes. There are oil and gas companies that store oil and gas in storage facilities across the state. They pay an inventory tax on that. Your legislature, the people standing up here that are suddenly interested in infrastructure, voted to stake hundreds of millions of dollars every year to give to out-of-state oil companies to reimburse them for their inventory tax that they're paying to the cities and counties. And suddenly they wonder what's happened to the revenue.
The bill now goes back to the Senate for approval. The controversy over the state flag has found its way into the session. House Ways and Means Chairman Jeff Smith of Columbus says he will block an effort by Republican Representative William Shirley of Quitman to require public universities to fly the state flag if they receive certain tax breaks. 8 schools in Mississippi have chosen to stop flying the flag, which contains the Confederate battle emblem. Opponents of the flag say it symbolizes hate. Supporters say it symbolizes heritage. Shirley was successful this week in adding the requirement to Senate Bill 2509, which would help Mississippi State and Southern Miss with student housing. Smith tells the Associated Press that the uproar over the flag has caused hard feelings and he will kill the bill. Here's the debate on the issue from the House floor.
We're going to keep rocking this baby till we get it done. As long as I'm here, we're going to keep seeing this amendment till we decide whether we're going to have a flag flying at institutions of higher learning that people are getting state dollars for, or not fly a flag. So it's up to y'all.
I don't think it is appropriate for us to punish institutions, particularly the students, when some administrator may have decided somewhere, and it's not required by law that they fly the flag. Having said that, I agree with the gentleman from Clark. It's a bad situation when we have institutions that, for whatever reason, maybe good reasons as they perceive or reasons we would agree or not agree with, it's a bad situation when your own state flag is not flown.
I know they say you're celebrating your heritage and what your forefathers did or went through, but you have to recognize there's a significant portion of Mississippi that will not feel the same way about that. It's an emotional issue that ought not enter into the political actions here in this chamber because of that. Why would you touch the nerves of so many people and rub it in just because you believe you can?
It sort of offends me that we've got to stand here and worry about which flag any of our universities fly. You ought to worry about the engineering department at Mississippi State if it's funded enough, and the ag program at Alcorn State, journalism at Ole Miss. You can go on and on. We've got pretty good universities, but they're struggling, and the real issue here that the gentleman from Lowndes, the chairman, has brought before you has to do with fulfilling the mission of what we established 8 universities for, dorms to house students. That's the real issue here, not the flag today.
If anybody thinks that this amendment is going to stay in there in conference, the Easter Bunny's coming, Santa Claus came at Christmas, and the junior gentleman from Madison is going to vote green the rest of the year. So I want to tell you this, if you would. The gentleman from Robert E. Lee, my good friend from Madison, senior gentleman from Madison, made some good points. The gentleman's got a right to offer his amendment, but I'm the chairman, y'all. If you don't like me, tell the speaker and he get rid of my skinny butt. But until then, when it goes to conference, I'm going to be the lead conferee. All I can ask you to do is trust me like you used to do my good friend from Forest, and we're going to take care of the house.
Ladies and gentlemen, this amendment has nothing to do with the design of the flag, the makeup of the flag at all. This is not a design bill. This basically says that if institutions of higher learning wants to take taxpayers' money of this state, they fly whatever that flag is that they decide. It has nothing to do with the current design at all. Thank you.
In favor of the amendment, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 57 yeas, 56 nays, the amendment passes.
Members of the Legislative Black Caucus say they will protest by slowing down business in the House if there are further efforts to pass a state flag requirement. The issue of domestic violence divorce has new life at the Capitol. The Senate added language to a House bill dealing with protective orders in criminal sexual assault cases this week. Last week, House Judiciary B Chairman Andy Gibson was criticized after he killed the Senate's original bill on domestic violence divorce. Gibson says he took a second look, reworked the language, and offered another by amending a separate Senate bill. He talked about it with MPB's Mark Rigsby.
When I received these bills, it was 7 days before the deadline, so I had a very limited amount of time to research this. I talked with our Senate chairman about it, committed to him that I would research it, did that, and the result of my research was domestic violence, domestic abuse is already a ground for divorce in Mississippi, has been for over 100 years. People have been divorced for that very reason. And it's been around so long that the Supreme Court has actually issued a series of cases saying what is abuse, what is not. The problem I identified in talking to some of these ladies over the course of a week or so, the problem is the judge in their local county wouldn't grant a divorce for the type of abuse they were experiencing. Even though the Supreme Court said that they should, the law was not being applied equally across the board from county to county, from judge to judge. So that led me to conclude, and I have to thank the women who called me to thank them publicly for talking with me and telling me what happened, what the reality was. They knew it was a ground for divorce, but they couldn't get it because the judge wouldn't grant it. So the issue was the application of the law by the judges. So we worked with a group here in the House that was interested in this issue to craft a new evidentiary-based solution, which clarifies the types of abuse that a judge would look at and say, that is the habitual cruel and inhuman treatment standard, and standards of proof for that. And we've gotten broad support. It passed the House unanimously, and it addresses the underlying issue rather than this surface issue of adding a couple of words that some judge would have had to interpret somewhere. The Senate bill, as it came to us, would not have done anything to help women, our children in abusive situations. Our bill does.
There were some comments made last week by the author of the bill over in the Senate, essentially saying that if there was another chairman of Judiciary B over on the House side, maybe that version would have passed. Also, there was some exchange on Twitter, maybe in private, I don't know, between yourself and one of the commentators for our show, Brandon Jones. Can you give us your position on the criticism that you've received?
Well, I can just tell you the truth, that neither of those people came to ask me to pass this bill at any time, before the deadline or after the deadline. One lobbyist who came to see me about it told me privately that that bill really didn't do anything. It was more of a PR campaign. And that's when I decided I wasn't taking this bill up. I didn't get elected to come up here and play games. I came up here to make a difference. And, any man that beats a woman isn't worthy to be called a man, much less a husband. And it doesn't do anybody a bit of good to pass something that just restates what the law already is. What we've done is actually taken a step back, took a little more time, researched it, identified the real problem, and passed a real solution.
What is the next step in the process for what you have proposed?
It has gone to the Senate. I don't think anybody held it on a motion to reconsider, but it will be transmitted now back to the Senate. I've already contacted the Senate chairman, and to Chairman Tyndall's credit, he and I did talk about this before the deadline. I committed to him to research this and to work with him on it, and I've done what I said I was going to do. He is committed to work with us on the new language, and I'm confident that we're going to pass this into law this year for the first time in Mississippi history.
Both the House and the Senate must agree on one piece of legislation on domestic violence divorce before it can be signed by the governor to become law. A bipartisan group of legislators under 40 are banding together to form the Mississippi Future Caucus. The group will work across the aisle on issues that impact the future of our state, things like education, workforce development, and government transparency and accountability. They also want to find ways to keep talented young people in Mississippi so they are not so inclined to seek opportunities out of state. Representing what's known as the millennial generation, the caucus is made up of 13 House members and 1 senator. They're led by Republican Representative Toby Barker of Hattiesburg and Democratic Representative Jeremy Anderson of Moss Point. Anderson is the youngest member of the legislature. Religious leaders and other elected officials are calling on lawmakers to enact meaningful prison reform. The group Clergy for Prison Reform met at the Capitol this week. Pastor C.J. Rhodes of Mount Helm Baptist Church in Jackson leads the group. He breaks down the group's list of suggestions to lawmakers on how to accomplish prison reform in Mississippi.
First of all, we are asking that all Mississippians suffering from addiction and mental illness not have their issues and illnesses sentenced to prison. They don't belong in prison for their sickness. Second, we believe that Mississippi should reform its habitual offender statute to ensure nonviolent offenders do not spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Third, we believe that Mississippi must pass state legislation to end the operation of debtors' prisons. And lastly, we believe that Mississippians deserve a chance for redemption and an opportunity to fulfill God's purpose for their life.
When I first came many years ago to this body, the Mississippi Department of Corrections, if you can believe this, had a budget of some 89 or 94 million, somewhere there in between. Now think about that, about $90 million budget for MDOC. Now it is in excess of $340+ million. I think around 380 as a matter of fact. And that's ridiculous. When we as a state, if we really want to grow and we want to thrive and become successful as far as economic development and taking care of the people of this state, when we put more emphasis on education and less emphasis on incarceration, I think we will begin to grow into our own. We have a great state and we have great potential, but criminal justice being tough on crime is just entirely something that we cannot afford. We need to put less emphasis on trying to keep people down and put more emphasis on lifting people up.
Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Austin Barbour is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones Law Firm and is a former member of the House. Brandon, Austin, good to have you with us as always.
Thank you.
Let's talk first about infrastructure. We talked about infrastructure since the beginning of the season here on At Issue. Finally, we have a bill that seems to be getting some traction. Austin, is there some real meat here? Is this significantly different from what they were able to do earlier?
I think it's significantly different, and we discussed this sort of before the show, is that I think this has a real chance to pass. I think it has a real chance to become law and to be, I hate to use the word Band-Aid, it's more than a Band-Aid, but something that can really help with the infrastructure issue that we have here in Mississippi. We have discussed time and time again that infrastructure was one of the top 3 issues that the legislature had to deal with. And I always caution my friend across the table to say, let's give them time. This is going to go into March. Let's not judge too quickly. And I think here the House has moved forward with a package that they say could bring forth $150 to $175 million by July. I don't quite understand where that number is. I trust them. I do. I just don't understand it. Certainly there's $50 million in new bond money. They're going to redirect internet, let me get that term right, internet sales tax dollars that are voluntarily paid by companies like Amazon for Mississippians who are purchasing stuff. They're going to use those funds. And the good thing is a vast majority of the money will go directly to cities and the vast majority of money will go directly to counties. So it's a great start. I'm very happy where they are, Wilson, on this issue.
Not nothing. I mean, 50 million is your baseline number. That's the part that we can really sink our teeth into and count on. And it's important. We've talked about it many times, how many different needs we have. This will begin to address some of those needs. But we saw one of the great moments of political theater that we're going to see this entire session when Senator Hobb Bryan came in at the conclusion of that press conference
and kind of took it over. Not only did he step up to the podium, he stepped up to the podium while Republican members of the House were still standing up there behind him. And I think he used all the same props. And what he said was very important, because what he talked about was how we are struggling mightily to answer the basic questions of this session, and one of them is revenue. And if you'll notice, tucked into what the speaker said, this is predicated on a 2% growth number, and that some of that money might go into infrastructure. Fellas, we haven't met our budget number in 1 month of the last 12 months. We are $133 million behind. We're $200 million behind where we were last year. And there are $375 million in tax cuts that come on the books in the next fiscal year. And so the notion that we're going to have growth and that that's where money's going to go into this program, that's probably a fallacy, and we can go ahead and discount that now. And Hobb was right. We've got a serious financial problem in this state. I like seeing us prioritize infrastructure, but our budget problem is not going away.
Yeah, but this is where Hobb was wrong. First of all, whatever. If he wants to go up there and, steal the podium, that's fine. Whatever. But he is sort of using he's talking about the inventory tax. An inventory tax is a tax that in-state companies, out-of-state companies have to pay on, quote, their inventory that they have on the books. He used the out-of-state oil and gas companies. Oh my gosh, these evil people who are investing millions of dollars and have thousands of employees in Mississippi, that they're going to get this huge tax break. Well, they will get a tax break. They will get a tax cut by getting rid of the inventory tax. But so will hundreds of small Mississippi companies, big Mississippi companies, companies that are based here in Mississippi. This is a philosophical disagreement. I think that giving those folks this tax cut, it's a competitive advantage as we're out trying to recruit against Tennessee, and lets them reinvest their dollars back into their company, give their employees better wages and benefits.
All right, let's move to another topic now, the state flag, another topic that comes up season after season, session after session. Brandon, Representative Shirley said that he's going to keep rocking this baby. Why do you think he feels the need, and as do some other members of the legislature perhaps, to keep rocking this baby?
That was an embarrassment. That demonstration was sad. Representative Shirley should not be in the House. He disqualified himself with those comments. This was a bill that was there to help provide for housing at two of our major universities where it's desperately needed. You see Jeff Smith, Republican chairman, who has worked mightily on an important piece of legislation. The Senate seems to be in agreement with this concept to introduce this state flag debate into this issue yet again. It was spiking the ball. I know exactly where Representative Ed Blackman was coming from, because it was such an unnecessary sway into an issue that is so divisive. And I think that was an embarrassing moment on the House floor, and I hope that somebody runs against Shirley and beats him.
I don't think he disqualified himself from being in the House. You're passionate on this issue. I'm not going to mince words with you on that or argue with you about what you're saying. I wish we could move past this issue. Listen, the responsibility of the legislature is to give Ole Miss, Jackson State, and all the rest of our state institutions the tools that they need, the dollars that they need to help make sure that they're educating these students who come from Mississippi, who come from out of state, who come from all around the world, to get them educated. We want to make our universities and colleges throughout Mississippi top tier, nationally renowned around the world. That is what the tools, that's what the big issue is. That's what we should be focused on, not whether they're going to fly the state flag. I understand where William Shirley is coming from, Representative Shirley. That is the state flag that we have right now. I understand. But it's just not an important issue. It's just not. What's an important issue is making sure that we have the best engineering school at Ole Miss and State, the best law school, the best medical school, whatever the best colleges are. That is what we should be focused on, because that's how we improve Mississippi. Really smart kids out of those schools, find a way to have jobs that they want to work on, stay here in Mississippi. That's how we make Mississippi a better place.
Brandon, Representative Andy Gibson mentioned you, or he was asked about you and the exchange that you had with him about the domestic violence portion of that bill. Has his whole approach to that legislation, even after the fact, surprised you?
Not so much. I've known Andy a long time. He and I went to college together, and then we were elected into the House at the same time. So we've known each other a while. Look, Andy was absolutely wrong about the Senate bill. Senator Sally Doty, Senator Bryce Wiggins, you know, the chairman of the committee that sent it over, they all worked very hard on what was an important bill. I would simply remind Representative Gibson that that bill removed the word habitual from the law. It also made it easier from a standard of proof perspective to get a divorce if you were a person who was a victim of domestic violence. But you know what happened? He kept working. And I don't know if he kept working because the spotlight was turned on him in a certain way, or if he caught heat, or what the reason was, or if he was just truly being diligent in the process. It really doesn't matter, because what he and his committee produced was an excellent piece of legislation. We looked at it at the Coalition Against Domestic Violence just this week, and I had an opportunity to speak to about 8 shelter directors who all agreed that if you look at each facet of Representative Gibson's bill, it's a good one. And I noticed that the Senate, once again, added their language into another bill. What's exciting about this for advocates and for people who work at these shelters is there seems to be a real movement towards passing something. And that's such a great change from where we were a week ago. And look, to course correct during a session is one of the hardest things you can do in the legislature. And so it doesn't matter to me if Representative Gibson got frustrated at me. It doesn't matter to me if he got frustrated at Senator Doty. The truth of the matter is he stuck with it. There's a good product there, and I applaud him. I'm very glad he did.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example. Sometimes this show can sometimes be a forum for particular issues. And look, I think Andy Gibson deserves a lot of credit on this. He didn't just listen to you. He talked to constituents and people around the state who had this issue. But you make this point. The legislators deserve credit for continuing to work on issues, important issues, whether it's domestic violence and how that relates to divorce, or if we get back to the infrastructure issue. The House deserves a lot of credit for this. Trey Lamar, Jason White, Charles Busby, the Speaker, all those people who've been working on this. And the Senate's going to deserve credit when we come back next week as they continue to work on the House product that has come back to them. We've got to give these men and women the full 90 days to get their job done. And sometimes in the society we're in, we're so quick to judge, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook. That's just the society we're in. But sometimes you've got to be patient, let them get their job done.
Austin, thank you. Brandon, thank you, as always. And we thank you for joining us on At Issue. We are out of time. Don't forget, you can check out the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And we'll see you next week with another edition of At Issue. Good night.